Welcome again to In the Huddle. Well, today we are joined by Australian basketball royalty. If you have been following the great game of basketball for any length of time, you will have heard of one of our game's greatest coaches. I'm, of course, talking about Brian Kerle. And Brian joins us in this episode to talk about this game he loves so much, his coaching philosophy. We'll take a trip down memory lane and hear his take on the US college basketball pathway. Brian, welcome to In the Huddle, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, it's as I said, I didn't want to embarrass you there at the top, but it's very good to be in the presence of one of the greats of the game. So, mate, in preparation, I've got to say I've been reading through your bio and career highlights in prep for this episode, and it took me a few hours to get through it all. But I came across this sort of quote of yours amongst your bio, and it says, basketball is a rewarding game that has so much to offer. It brings together communities, different age groups, demographics, and creates a safe space for everybody to develop. Is that, mate, what you love most about basketball, that it brings people together?
It is now more than before when I was up in that elite coaching and elite playing, Chris. And it's a big thing for me at the moment. And I've just got some funding from the state government for cohesive communities because I'm trying to help and everybody to understand each other and get to know each other, because there's a lot of ignorance in the world. And I think if we can overcome that ignorance, then we'll all be happy and live better together. And my basketball now is so multicultural. It's just a pleasure to be involved in. Even from my Friday ladies basketball, it's so multicultural. And the kids, it is just amazing, all the nationalities that now come here and to be coached by me. So that to me is important. And I think with basketball being played on a reasonably confined area, you do rely on your teammates a lot more. And, you need to get them all working together and be friendly, cohesive, supportive of each other. And that's important. And, it's the same with all my programs. I encourage everybody to look after each other and to take care of each other, but in respect each other. I think that's the biggest thing that we need to do, is respect each other's cultures, and it's the diversity that I work with. It's just made my life so much more enjoyable. It's it might be like I said, I've been in it 55 years, Chris, and enjoyed every moment of it. There's been ups and downs and things like that, but dealing with these sort of people is just, I'm blessed, I'm lucky, I am very, very lucky, and I've met some wonderful people.
Yeah, no, that's 55 years is a heck of an accomplishment, and but and you've seen it all. But I guess just to hear that, I guess my next question was going to be is this just a recent perspective, or is this something that you noticed from the start? What basketball can do for people. Sounds like it might be more something in your latter years of coaching that you've discovered, or did you sort of see some signs of this when you first took the game up?
I'm not I haven't got a great education, things like that, but I have got a lot of street smarts and a lot of common sense, Chris. And, I saw this need because I've traveled the world, and you have too. And, look, you get to know how everybody lives, and you realise how fortunate you are here in Australia. And we are a fortunate country. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that, getting this situation and reading it. And, I've said all along, and I've spoken to government people and things like that, we need to get people, with all our migrants and all the African people coming over here and all these great countries coming over here, we need to understand each other. And I think also they need to understand our culture also, and especially our Indigenous in culture. I think that's very, very important. So I'm working very hard on that. I've got some funding to do that for the next 12 months. And I hope that, we can bring everybody together. And with my program, I'm not just about teaching them basketball, Chris. I help a lot of young kids as well. I have 3 or 4 Indigenous kids at the moment, probably 5, I think it is, that we help them discover themselves but also support them. We just had 2 join on the weekend, and giving these kids a chance. I've just got some funding. I've got to do work with at-risk kids. So I've got to go to the detention centre and talk to kids out there and do basketball with them, but also with youth justice kids. And, if we can help some of these kids, we're going to be a lot better community to live in.
That's right.
We can't just ditch them and say, oh, they're no good. Okay. There's good in everybody. And I think if we can find that good space in them and that good part of those people, and, it's great. It gives me a great feeling. And, a couple of years ago, I kept a young boy out of a detention centre, and, he's working now, and he's, helping his mum and things like that. Now, that to me is like winning a championship, mate. It really is. That is winning a championship to me. So I'm pretty proud of that situation, that I can do that and I can do it my way. And I think basketball is the way to bring everybody together.
Yeah, no, it's pretty inspirational, mate. I think from the outsiders looking into at your career, for example, and you think, well, gee, how do you top that? How do you top a career playing as a boomer and going through and then coaching success, which speaks for itself, which we'll come back to later. Well, you've just topped it, as you say, and I think having real impact on people. Basketball is just a vehicle, really, isn't it? It's not, and that's the way you bring them together.
Well, I've been pushing a bit of a flyer that a friend of mine did up for me a couple of years ago, and it says you're never alone at Brian Kerle Basketball, and I really mean that. And we encourage kids. I had a couple of chats yesterday with a couple of young boys, and letting them know that they come here, they're amongst friends. Reach out. Don't bottle it up. Don't keep it to yourself. And I'm not trained in psychology and things like that, but I can tell when kids are troubled. I really can. So I don't intrude in their privacy, but I just say, hey, everything okay? And you want to talk, and I leave it like that. So
sometimes that's all they need, just to know that someone's noticing them and things like that. So you're doing great stuff, mate. And I know that's it's a very selfless role. You're probably not the person who wants the limelight and things like that, but I'm just going to shift gears a little bit and talk about you. so many that know of you, Brian, will think of you as the coach of the great Brisbane Bullets teams of the 80s. That's certainly the first thing that comes to mind when I hear your name. Working with names like Sengstock and Bruton and Loggins and Ronnie the Rat, Radcliffe, and so many others. And we'll come back to that. But before all that, you were some player. I mean, you're a late starter to the game, though, right?
I was very late. Yes. I think I was just a couple of months short of being 21.
Right.
Never seen a game of basketball. Never seen a basketball court. And so that's where it all started. And
that what did you say? That was in Wollongabba, the police boys. Is that where you started?
I played a lot of tennis, Chris. I was a bit like you, and I love tennis. And my father was in the police force, and we lived in a small town of Rosedale. We had a tennis court right beside us. We had a tennis court at the school, and there's only 48 kids at the school, so you could use the courts any time you like. So, and my dad was a good cricketer and rugby league player, so I had all that sport, but. Mates and I, we used to go and play in the satellite tournaments, in Nambour and Canberra and all those places. I don't have to explain to you, but anyway, people would like to hear that. But a couple of us decided that, and I was 6'7" and skinny like Leroy, but and we decided we need to build ourselves up. Like in those days, you didn't know what strength and conditioning was or anything like that. But so I went to the gym at the Gabba Police Boys Club, and the police officer on the front counter kept pestering me and saying, hey, you're tall, why don't you play basketball? So after 2 or 3 weeks of this, I thought, oh, well, there's only one way I can keep him quiet is go out there and try. Which I did. I joined this Oxley soccer team that played in the off-season in the summer because winter they played this soccer, and went out there and trained one night and gave up tennis a week later.
There you go. I'll tell you what, though, I could have done with some of your height when I was playing tennis. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, but they all pinged them at my feet, mate, because they knew I was tall.
Yeah. There you go. No, that's good. I didn't know that. I knew that you were a keen tennis player, but I didn't know that you were a serious tennis player in that respect, and really playing that much. So that's interesting.
I love sport, mate. I love sport, and in those days we didn't have these things, and you played sport. You finished school, you got out and you played cricket.
Yeah.
I used or tennis and things like that. And when we lived out there, I used to get into trouble because I wouldn't come in for dinner.
Yeah.
It was dark.
Yep.
Now you try to force kids to go out, but I got into trouble because I was late for dinner and things like that. But and that kids are lucky these days. They've got all these modern instruments. But I think that era that I was brought up in, you don't like telling young people this because they don't want to hear it. A lot of them, but I think that, they are blessed with all the facilities and all the support they get in their sport these days.
It's certainly a pretty good time of opportunity now for young kids, but I'm a little bit the same, mate. I'm a bit old fashioned with that. The old call from mum to come up for dinner at 6 o'clock, and then you eventually get there by 7 o'clock, and your dinner's cold, but you don't care because you've just scored 50 in your backyard.
That's right, yeah. And you just loved it, and those were great days, and but kids now facilities and like the support things and things like that, and access to everything is unbelievable these days.
It is. It's a different world, that's for sure. But so from that moment where you took it up and you've given tennis, you've put the rackets away forever, and so you've obviously made some pretty quick progress. I think, what was it, C grade there at the Police Boys, then their A grade at Lang Park, and then on to St Kilda pretty quickly from there, wasn't it? Did I get that right?
Yeah, you're pretty close there, and now you tested my memory, mate. You're going back to 1965 here. Now, what happened was, we played C grade with the Gabba Police Boys Club team, and we went through undefeated, and Lang Park beat us in the grand final. So seeing the boys, they went back to soccer. Lang Park came and said, "Oh, would you come and play for us?" So, which I did, and I only played here for 2.5 years, to be honest with you, and then I was recruited to go down to Melbourne. So I went down there and tried out in 1966 early, just to see if I liked it. I'd never been out of Brisbane in those days, that time. So and I liked it. Came back. I was engaged at the time. I asked my then to be in-laws if I could marry my girlfriend, and which they were apprehensive about. I said, I'm only going down there for 2 years, and I stayed 16. So
there you go.
Yeah, so I didn't have the in-laws on that. They were pretty supportive in there, and I think they were pretty proud of me too for what I achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. If you stayed down there for good reason, obviously you're doing very well, and so St Kilda, you had some success there. Just reading through your chronological list of achievements, and then it didn't take you too long, mate, to make the national scene or make a mark on the national scene. So, do you remember the time you became a boomer?
Well, I did, because in those days we used to play interstate competition, like Queensland played New South Wales naturally, and the titles were in Tasmania that year, in Hobart, and so Victoria, which was always very, very strong in basketball and interstate especially. So we played down there, and so they pick a team out of the games that were played, and I was chosen for 1970 Australian team to go to Yugoslavia, actually it was in those days. And that's how it all happened, and I had a pretty good tournament sort of thing down there. A lot of it was all new to me. Everything I did for the first 8 or 10 years was new, because I hadn't done anything. Not like kids today. They're playing, like I'm teaching kids here 4 and 5 years old now. So by the time they're 21, they're going to be playing 16, 17 years. So that's the big difference. It was great. And I remember the first club training session we had for the Australian team to choose it. It was on a Friday night, and I twisted my ankle. I only twisted my ankle probably twice in my career, because I never jumped very much, Chris. So lucky. And so I twisted on the Wednesday night, and I rang up Howard Toyne, who was the Olympic team doctor in those days, and I said, "Doc, I've got to play. I've got to train on Friday night." can you do something for me? So I went in there, and on the Thursday afternoon and Friday morning gave me a quarter zone, and mate, I trained all the weekend and made the Australian team. So yeah, that's what I remember mostly about that part is, I wasn't going to sit on the sideline. That's all changed today because there's all these laws and people sue each other and things like that. But I wanted to try out. I wanted to play for Australia, and nothing was going to stop me.
Yeah, no, that's good, and nothing did stop you, which is great.
Nothing stopped me, no.
No, that's unreal. It's great to hear that because, as you say, it's probably unheard of these days, those types of things happening. But I guess that's one of the things that's changed. But what are some of the other things you think? What's the difference between being a 2020 boomer and a 1970 boomer? What's the big differences, do you think?
Well, I can tell you this: the first tour I went on with the Australian team, we went to America, and we had to pay our own way.
There you
go. We had to get out. Well, we got a few free meals and things like that, but we always went to banquets, those sort of food places, so we could really stock up on it. So, yeah, that was a big time, a big change then that came around for us, sort of thing. And the experience that we got out of it was super. And, it was just really great. But I just want to digress back to St Kilda, though, because I went down there, and St Kilda were a Div 2 team, and they come up to Div 1. And I got to tell you this, that when I went to Melbourne to play, I was told I'd never make it as a player. If I made Div 2 or Div 3, I'd be doing really well. Those were the best words that were ever said to me. All right? I'm not arrogant or anything like that, as you know. You've met me. I said to myself, I know what I can do. I know where I want to go, and I know what I want to be. And the only person that can stop me is myself. And now, if I had to listen to those people, I wouldn't be talking to you now.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So I went down there, and, I worked 5 days a week, and I also worked Saturday, 5.5 days a week. And I worked from 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock, trained every afternoon, and trained every lunchtime in the YMCA at Footscray.
Yeah.
And I had a physical job. It wasn't sitting in an office or sitting in front of a computer. I don't think we had computers in those days. But, that I was driven, and I knew, because, and I wanted to make something of myself, and I wanted to be somebody, because my father wanted me to be a police officer, and I failed. I was short-sighted, couldn't get in, and I could see the disappointment on his face and things like that. So I somehow I had this thing that I had to please him.
Yep.
It's a bit sad when you got to do that, I think, in a way. But that was the case, and I was determined to do it. So that's what drove me. In St Kilda, we got beaten in the grand final the first year. I went down there by Melbourne Tigers, Lindsay Goes, and his group, which in those days they had 10 out of the 12 Olympic players in their team.
Right. Yeah.
Players that wanted to play for Australia would go to them, but I wanted to prove myself. And so that was great. And the next year we won it. And we formed a dynasty down there. We had a great guy who was supported the club. We had a great committee, and it was all volunteers in those days. I remember we were selling raffle tickets in the St Kilda Hotel on a Friday night to raise money for the club. So that was where it all started there on the club side. And St Kilda, we won everything in Australia. And great coaches, and Ken Cole and David Lindstrom and people like that.
So so that was your a basketball catalyst for you, do you think, for launch your career? From there, if you hadn't gone to Melbourne, what do you think might have happened? Do you think with your career?
Chris, I look back because I had a troubled childhood, and my mother and father split up and things like that. And I always say to this day, and I tell a lot of kids this story too, that I think if I hadn't had sport to support me, I could have gone that other road, that other current. I was at the crossroads there a couple of times, and sport saved me, I think, and just helped me, gave me a lot of self-esteem, and I built up, because when I was young and I was 6'7", and I was very conscious of my height, and don't forget there wasn't many people around 6'7" in those days. And I didn't like getting on buses and things like that. but basketball made me feel a lot more confident within my body and my mind.
Yes.
So that was a great thing about the sport for me. So where I could have ended up if I hadn't gone down there, mate, I'd hate to think, but see, I believe in life things are meant to be and they happen for a reason. And me going to that gym with my mates, it was meant to be. All right. Yep. And from there, everything was meant to be, I think, as far as I'm concerned. And I remember when I made the first 72 Olympic team or the Australian team, some of my teammates said, "Oh, you're lucky you made the Australian team." They said that not in a bad way, but I said, no, I wasn't lucky. I worked for this and I deserved to get this. So
yep.
And I gave up a lot of things. I was married at the time and we'd started to have a young family and things like that. But I gave up a lot. I never went out. I never partied or anything like that. I just worked, played basketball, and said hello to my wife now and again when I came and left and everything. But no, so that's how it all started. And it's great talking to you because it really rekindles that memory and things like that. And when you get to my age, I start to forget a few things. But mate, I was blessed. I was really willing, and it was meant to be what happened to me.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I believe in that as well. And but I'm glad I'm talking to you about it because I think it's I think we got quite a few listeners to this podcast now, which is fantastic. And I think for anyone, it doesn't matter their age or even if they're in sport. I think listening to someone with drive and what motivated them, and then coming from reasonably humble beginnings or difficult beginnings for you, as you said, it just shows that what drive can do and what sometimes a bit of fate thrown in there as well. But even with fate, you've still got to work hard with that opportunity that comes your way, which you did. So you've earned everything you've got. So you should be proud, mate. So I mean, I don't know.
Chris, and probably one of the most envious things I have these days is I see so many kids with so much talent. Now, I wasn't a gifted athlete or anything like that, but I trained. I knew I had to be fitter and faster and stronger than all the. Yeah, well, the guy that I was battling for the place in the Australian team was Luke Longley's dad, Rick. And Rick was 6'10" and, a big boy from WA. And but he came over and played for Melbourne because he wanted to get in the Olympics and things like that. Yeah, Rick's a great guy, and so is Luke. Luke is a fantastic guy, and I think what he did for Australian basketball goes a little bit unnoticed, I think, at times. But yeah, great people. So that's who I had to battle, sort of thing, to make the Australian team, and I did. So, but I'm still friends with him today and stuff like that when I see him, which is not often because we're on both different sides of the world. He's over in Perth.
That's right. It was a world away sometimes, isn't it, over there? But that's that's interesting, and it's a really good perspective, as I said, for our listeners, young or older. So, look, so obviously, really appreciate you then taking us through that story with St Kilda and that beginning too. But you've obviously had a heck of a playing career, but I think there's a lot of probably people who probably think about you more as a coach, and some of your playing career has probably been overshadowed by your successful coaching career, which is obviously still going strong today. But question for you: are you a better coach than you were a player, Brian?
Well,
put you on the spot there.
You have the difference between coaching and playing is when you're a player, you can go out there and do it yourself, and you know what needs to be done. And I think to make a good coach, you've got to transfer that onto players. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
That's the biggest thing. And I got frustrated in the first couple of years with my coaching because I knew what I wanted, but I'd have to demonstrate it to players and things like that. And remember, Chris, how I came into coaching in the first place, I'd never, and in 1977, I think it was, we went on we'd won the Australian Club Championship, we'd won the Victorian Championship, we'd won everything. And I think it was for 2 or 3 years in a row. And David Lindstrom, who was our coach, he got a job over in Puget Sound in Oregon and at his old school. And anyway, so we were flying back. We did a tour. We played games over there, St Kilda, which we did every year. And on the way back two or three of the committee, we were in the plane, and they came to me and said, hey, we need to have a coach. We took an American guy with us, and he didn't turn out to be any good, and nobody sort of warmed to him at all. So we're flying back from over the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and I'd been with the club for 15 years or something playing. I can't remember that far back, but which was good. And I was loyal to the club, and I said, well, okay, I'll coach. Now, I never had any philosophies. I didn't have any idea about coaching at all. So I took it up, and and that's how I became coach at St Kilda. And once more, people said I'd never be able to coach. So that made me more determined, and it just drove me more, And so, mate, in those days too, going back to 1978, I took over coaching St Kilda, and I was on a hiding to nothing. Here's the team; they're up here, they're number one, they've won everything.
Absolutely.
I'm expected to win. If I lose, why did you lose? And I came second and third that year. So
yeah.
In 1999, the National Basketball League was formed, and I was coach at St Kilda, and of course we won the first 2 years, 1979, 1980. 1981, we were 3 games ahead, and we were invited to go to Brazil to play in the World Club Championships, but the league wouldn't change the dates of the final. So, there's probably one thing that haunts me still, is that I could have won 3 championships, the first 3 championships. But I won the first 2, so let's be happy with that.
I was going to say, we always want more, don't we, as coach? But there's always one that got away as well, isn't there?
Well, there is. You lose some, and when we come to the Bullets, I'll tell you a story there after the first game with the Bullets. But yeah, mate. But look, it's meant to be. I hate losing. I was obsessed in winning. I was too obsessed in winning, and I would shut down if I lost a game playing, even with coaching, But there's one thing that changed that, which we'll talk about later on if we still got time. But
yeah,
so mate, that's how it all come about, And so they said I would never play, and I said I'd never be able to. Well, I didn't say we wouldn't play, but I'd never make it as a player or make it as a coach. So.
Yeah, no, there's no better motivation, I reckon. But you made a really good point before about your transition into coaching, and it's something that I've been really interested in, because I was obviously a tennis player, and then transitioned into coaching, and certainly not at the level to which you were successful. But I've been lucky enough to ask some of the great Australian coaches this question, including Wayne Bennett and John Newcombe, and so I think it's fitting I asked you too, Brian. I guess the question is, what percentage of coaching is actual technique, tactic, and strategy, versus your relationship with each player, and we can answer that one. So what's the difference between the on-court and off-court, in coaching? But yeah, I remember listening to Lee Matthews, the great Collingwood and Brisbane Lions premiership winning coach, who obviously was voted the greatest player of the last century himself. And so for his transition from successful player to coach was difficult. And I remember him saying that if you simply expect that players can do what you did, or just you expect that by simply implementing what worked for you as a player, then all players should be able to do it. That was the biggest adjustment he needed to make, that it wasn't really a one-size-fit-all approach as well. Anyway, talk us through that, mate. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, that transition, from playing to coaching was difficult. It really was a difficult time, and the hardest thing is you're coaching players that you played with.
Yes.
And now you're telling players, hey, don't do this, don't do that. And hang on, we were mates, and that was a difficult thing to do. The following year, at the end of 78, 3 or 4 players left, which, they were getting older and things like that. So we brought in some new players. But, yeah, I'm a players coach, all right? I'm not one of those that write all these, that have more players than Shakespeare on the board and things like that. It's a simple game. I kept it simple. We like to run, and I had my philosophy. I got that from the coaches that I had before that, Kenny Cole. We used to run, and we'd press up full court all the time, because then that's enjoyable. People like watching it and things like that. And teams had more trouble trying to slow us down and things like that. I remember Lindsay Gaze used to make the nets really tight. So when the ball went through, it got stuck in the net. We could get it out of the basket and get going again.
Yes.
So we bought our own scissors and cut the net so to get through. So, yeah, like I said, I wasn't overcomplicated. I kept the game pretty simple. I had some great players play for me. I think I've had two of the greatest players that's ever played in the NBL, and there's been a lot of good ones in Leroy Loggins and Rocky Smith. And Rocky was with us in 1980 and 81, was one of the great players. So I knew how to handle the players, and they wanted to play for me and they wanted to play for the club. And I was big on that team bonding and that team strength of everybody. That was very important to me, because that's how we were successful as a team when I was playing. So I took that with me. But Chris, we never had YouTube or any of those fancy websites and things like that to look up basketball. Mate, if I wanted a book like that, Larry Bird, I had to go to America and buy it. So on tours, we would buy heaps of books of how to coach and things like that. And I read about the history of basketball. We didn't have videos and stuff like that. So any coach that would come, I'd sit down beside him and I'd just suck as much information out of him as I could, because that's invaluable. I still go to coaching clinics now.
Still learning.
Yeah, and the coaching director here at Southwest said, "Why do you come to these?" I said, "Mate, you never stop learning. You do not stop learning." And like I said, I don't want to coach at the high level anymore, and because I'm too demanding. I still coach a couple of 16, 18 boys teams, but if I can pass some of those things on, how I got to the top. And it's not just being a good shooter and that, it's also this part up here and that drive and getting out there. And I tell kids this story, that, there's only one thing will stop you, and that's yourself. And everywhere I go, I preach that because I believe in it. But yeah, so I kept it pretty simple. It was a big transition. Talking about Lee Matthews and Wayne Bennett and things like that. And I'm just jumping forward a few here.
You're right.
We set up once a month, we'd have lunch together. Wayne Bennett, John Buchanan, Mike Young, who was a great American baseball coach that came out here, Lee, and we had a couple of female coaches as well. And we'd sit down and we'd go to these places and they'd sponsor us to have a meal there. But we would sit around, Chris, and talk. And Lee Matthews was amazing. And I was talking about things that I did. He's writing it all down. So I learnt more in those meetings about coaching people, not coaching the game, but coaching people. And Wayne Bennett's a marvel at that, as you know.
He is.
He is a genius, a dead set genius. So I went away from there and I said, these coaches, they go and do all these fancy courses and things like that. When I won the first championship in 1979, the director of coaching at Victorian Basketball, Bill Palmer, comes into my office. Because I was working for Victorian Basketball. He said, "Curly, I better give you this now. Send you won the championship." He gave me a certificate to give me a level 1 coaching.
There you go.
And I've never sat for a coaching course ever since.
Yeah, you did it in reverse order. Get the championship first, then get your qualification.
So how's that? So the problem today is with a lot of coaches, they get this piece of paper. Oh, I'm a coach.
Yeah.
You don't coach at all.
No.
You haven't experienced. You don't know how to. And every player on your team is different.
Yes.
You've got to learn the character of your team. I always liked having a couple of cane toads on my team. Players you can kick and knock down, but they keep getting up.
Yep.
And I didn't like to have any cream puffs players sort of thing. And you got to have. I knew what you needed to make a team sort of thing, and that was the big thing, was having the strength of a team, and everyone knowing their roles.
Yes. Yeah. That's it.
Accepting, and anyone with egos will destroy a team.
And you just hear this about all the good teams, and you look at the All Blacks now, and they've got that culture of a no D head policy, and then you've got you hear about Wayne Bennett sort of saying, knowing which players to give a bit of a cuddle and the others to give a kick up the backside. So and you just it's just you hear it over and over and over, and it's about teaching the man or the woman, and knowing the person more so than the game. Obviously, you need to have a plan.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
Bellamy's probably the latest,
yeah, yeah,
in the Storm. So just and you hear every player talk about their coach, and they say, "Look, they care about me,
yeah,
right? That's the number one thing,
yeah,
and we know our role." They're the
yeah,
two biggest things that I see as just recurring as an observer of this. And
yeah.
geez, mate, I would have loved to have come to those lunches.
You know what, mate? I think of them today, and they were great. And you know what? You got to know the other coaches. Like Lee Matthews is, he was an intense player, as you'll know, and I followed
Yep.
Hawthorn when I was down there because I knew Peter Knights and all that. But
Yep.
I could ring Wayne Bennett up to if I was, I'd ring Wayne up and say, Wayne, I'm having problems with in this area here. And Wayne would, he gave me time. Lee Matthews would. Mike Young was one of the most intense baseball coaches. He was before his time out here in baseball. That's the problem with Mike, and because Mike didn't deal too well with hierarchy either. But he was driven, and that's why he was successful. He might have stood on people's toes, but he's different to what I am and some other coaches would be. But what he did was super, super, super stuff.
Yeah. Change the game.
Those dinners, mate, the food was just secondary, mate. It was just, you could sit there and in the end, you say, well, who's going to go? Who's going to leave sort of thing. No one wanted to leave.
Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah, I think if we all go to our PDs and things like we do that these days, I think you wouldn't find a better one than that group. That's for sure.
No, mate, there were some good ones in there, I'll tell you.
Absolutely. Mate, well, we will talk about the Bullets. We've sort of come to that sort of phase in terms of talking about your history. You mentioned that you wanted to tell me a story about how there might have been a turning point when you're at the Bullets. So, mate, talk us through that. Talk us through just that general wave of time for you that was obviously so memorable and so successful. But yeah, if you can start by telling us a little bit about that turning point for you.
Well, to start with, in end of 1983, there was a little coup down at St Kilda that got rid of me, sort of thing. All right, so that was the first time I was sacked. Now you got to remember, there's only two types of coaches, professional coaches: those who have been sacked and those who are waiting to be sacked. All right, so remember that. So anyway, I always had a desire to come back to Brisbane, but I had two or three clubs asking me what I want to do and would I do this and that. So Brisbane flew me up here. I had a chat to them, and because my wife always wanted to come back here as well, and I said yes. And they never told me at the time, but they were $30,000 in debt, in the red. All right, and my job was to run the stadium, do the marketing, do the media, do all these things, coach the team. I refereed games at the stadium if the refs didn't turn up, and I cleaned it if the cleaner didn't turn up. That was my role there. And then, because in those days we trained at night because all the players were working during the day.
Yes.
So that's what I came to. They didn't tell me that. And so once more, I was driven because I had to work hard so I could get paid. And after a month, my pay was cut off by Queensland Basketball because Brisbane owed them money, and they were getting money from the government to pay me to do this role.
Right.
All right. So I didn't get paid for 3 months, and I was paying for things to fix up the stadium and things like that, and what have you. So that's how it all started off, So once more, here I am. I'm controlling my own destiny, and but like I said, I had a multiple role, a really multiple. I sat in a small office, smaller than the one I sit in today, and I had a girl part-time who was the daughter of the president. So, and we had a committee, all right, and they were lovely people, but, I knew this wasn't going to work the way it was. So that's how my role started there.
Yeah.
So, and, but when I took over the Bullets, the most interesting thing was I called a meeting, anyone interested in coming to play for me at the Brisbane Bullets. 22 people turned up, 22 players. After the meeting, 2 of them left straight away because I said we're going to be training 4 to 5 days a week and we'll be training Saturdays and Sundays. Well, in those days, you don't do that. You go surfing and stuff like that up here.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm from Victoria, right? And I know what hard work was. So I said to them, I outlined them. And after the first training session, I think we lost another 3. So we're down to about 17 players now after the first training session. Well, this is too hard.
Yep.
Yeah. So it went and went when I finally ended up with 13 players.
Right.
You're only allowed to have 12, but I ended up with 13, and I didn't have the nerve to cut 13 players because he turned up to every training session. Wasn't the greatest player or anything like that, but he worked hard and wanted to be there. So I didn't cut him. But I knew, Chris, then that I had a team of guys that would do anything for me, sort of thing. And
Yep.
All right. And I told them what my philosophies were, what my plan was, and things like that. Ronnie Radcliffe was here. I was going to get rid of Ronnie because I thought, he just looked like a shaggy old, well, they call him the rat and that's how he was and that's how he lived. But a great guy, and a great basketball brain.
Yeah, from Washington, wasn't he? Yeah, from Washington.
Yeah. His father coached at Eamoncore. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a pretty small town and he was a high school coach. But Ronnie had a head for basketball and a brain for basketball, really intelligent. And never said much, but, and I can tell you a story about Ronnie and I'll tell it now so I don't forget it. But, Ronnie was one who would go into the room before the game, right? And Ronnie would find the closest corner and he'd be sitting there like this, half asleep. And I'm thinking, geez, what am I going to do here? So anyway, but Chris, I never did anything. I never altered it. I never altered the way he dressed and things like that. And we made a cult figure out of him anyway.
Yeah, sure did.
All right. So that's how Ronnie got ready for games. Leroy come in with his in those days, the big boombox on his shoulder, right? You don't change it. Larry Sandstock, the most frustrating player of all time. Larry would put his shoes on, undo them, take them off, change his socks and all that sort of thing. Sibley would walk around annoying hell out of everybody and things like that. But we told him, hey, you do it under control, don't upset anybody and things like that.
Yeah.
This is how players prepare.
Yep.
So you don't change that.
Yes.
Use that to your advantage. And I think they're the things as a coach. To understand your players is probably the biggest thing. But that's what Ronnie was like. And we had a psychologist working for us there at one stage. And he came to me one day and he said, Curly, you've got to get the rat to understand me and communicate with him. I said, mate, he don't even do that with me. How am I going to get him to do it with you? And, so, mate, that's the sort of players you dealt with sort of thing, and I think that's one of the big learning things about coaching. And people think it's all X's and O's and things like that. It's not. Because if you can't understand your players and you're not going to be able to run the X's and O's, I don't think.
Yeah.
So that period there when I took over and we were training, I was driving up from the Gold Coast every day as well. So I was leaving home probably 6 o'clock in the morning, getting home at 10 o'clock at night. But I only did that for 12 months. I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm just, that white line started moving. And that first year, of course, we went through and I've got to be careful how I say this because Terry Ryan's sitting right opposite me and he was with Canberra at the time. But Canberra and Brisbane, we played off. No, that was that wasn't the first. Yeah, it was. We played off in '84. We played against each other in the grand final in Brisbane. And anyway, we lost by a couple of points. All right, and Canberra were just too good. They hit the shot on the bow. Well, hit a shot, then it was a great shot. And they had great players, and we always had great contests against each other. It was fantastic sort of thing. But anyway, we came back. That grand final in '84 was held in Melbourne, and we came back to the airport in Brisbane. I think there was 4 people to greet us.
Jeez.
All right, 4 people. And the then president came up to me and said, "Oh, Curly, don't worry, mate. If you had won it this year, what would you have to achieve next year? What would there be to achieve?" And I just looked at him and, God bless him because he's not with us today. But I said, mate, what's wrong with winning it 2 years in a row and then 3 years in a row?
Exactly. You've got to have those things to strive for, I think.
Yes. So anyway, and of course next year, 85 is all history now that we go to Chandler and, like we started off at Auchenflower with, well, they used to get 200 people to the game. We averaged 1,500 in 84. And then we go to Chandler and we averaged nearly 3,500, 4,000 and stuff like that. And we won that in 85 against West Adelaide against my mate Kenny Cole. So
yeah, right.
So the first 4 years we made the grand final just by playing simple basketball. I had a couple of good players too, and Leroy Loggins and things like that. But yeah, so that's where it all started, and right up until 87, 88, and then I had a bad. I think I got sacked, and I got sacked twice at the Bullets and once down there. So I thought after that, Kerle, there's a message here for you. And that's when I was, I left the Bullets. But had a great time.
Absolutely, can't take away those years from you, mate, and what you're able to achieve. And I'm as a Brisbane boy myself, I remember I didn't grow up around basketball, tennis and those types of things for me in AFL really, but I think that era got me into basketball in a big way, and I was probably one of those kids out there at Chandler in '85. I'm not sure I made it to the grand final, but I was out there that season, and it probably put basketball on the map for me. But you mentioned before you were the marketing manager, you were everything, but the marketing, certainly you had very marketable guys. Even yourself were pretty marketable. You're such a lively figure on the sidelines in the matches, always very memorable. I mean, I think that's what what Brisbane sort of fell in love with the Bullets in that era. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I did the marketing. I never did a marketing course. I used to do the media. I never did a media. I ran a radio show in Melbourne for an hour once a week as well. I'd never done any radio before, but, and I got Victorian Basketball, the biggest sponsorship ever when I started, which I worked for them as well in those roles. So, so I was very fortunate in doing all that sort of stuff. But, once more, like I said, with my coaching, I never had a coaching certificate. And And I used to talk a little bit at QUT to marketing people and things like that. They thought I was a guru or something, And I used to, the one thing I told them, I said, listen, just because at the end of this course you get a piece of paper, that doesn't mean to say you can market or you're a good marketer or anything like that. It doesn't. There's a lot of common sense into it and things like that. And, which is very challenging. But look, I loved it. And it was, I guess I had a way with getting into the room and getting into and talking to people. I remember the first sponsor we won't name them, but we went and saw, I said, sat down on the opposite side of the desk and there was a lady and I said, this is what we're all about. And she said, oh, who watches basketball? Who cares about basketball? And, I'm holding the desk underneath to keep my calm. And I said, oh, okay. So we walked out and they never sponsored us, of course. And, and there's a lot of stories on that side away from the coaching that, I'm pretty proud of. And, with my relationship with Forex and, none of them wanted to know us in 84. But after that, then they were fighting over us. And, and I was getting sponsorship coverage deals from the TV stations and things like that. So, look, but, and I think that both of them sort of went hand in hand. And I guess I was not lucky. I was fortunate, I think, because of my size and I could walk anywhere. But I got out and about too. That was
you did the work.
I converted journalists who. Peter Bellucci was one. He was sitting in the corner at the box at the Gabba in the old days. And I went up to him and I said, Peter, I'm Brian Kerle. And he said, what do you want? I said, I'm about the case of the Bullets. Who are they? And but Peter went on and worked for me full time in the Bullets and is still one of my best friends today. So
fantastic.
But like I said, I had the nerve to do it and I was confident that, and I knew, I just wanted positive people around me. I don't like negativity. I want positive people around me, people that can believe. And I had a great group of people driving the Bullets as well. People that were lawyers and media people and marketers and what have you, and also directors of big companies. Yeah, so I could go in and talk to those people. But I think the coaching helped me with doing that, and that helped me doing the coaching as well. I think the fact that you get the respect of people and things like that, you're fine.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. There's a lot of themes here, mate, and the one that seems to be recurring is never say no to Brian Kerle. He'll prove you wrong. Never say you can't. I think success comes from initially proving people wrong, working hard, having drive, and getting successful, positive people around you. That's fairly consistent message today. But so, and I guess what I think is really genuine about you, Brian, is that, like your story, is that you still carry that philosophy now. You've been, as you said before, 55 years in the sport. It tells me it's very genuine, and it's a passion that you can't fake. It's not a job, as you said. It's a passion. But to me, listening to you, it doesn't really matter if you're coaching a professional team or a group of Indigenous youths in Thursday Island who are playing the game of basketball for the first time.
Yeah, well, Michael Ahmad was the first Indigenous player to ever play in the Olympics for Australia in Tokyo in many, many years ago. 1964 Tokyo was. And he came up to me before training. I used to watch them train, the Australian team there at the end of 87, getting ready to pick the team to go to Mexico. And he came up and put his arm around me and he said, Kerle, you don't know much about me, or you don't know me, which I did because I'd played against him anyway, and I'd seen him play. But he said, mate, I know you're new to Melbourne. You just come down from Brisbane, sort of thing. Is there anything I can ever do? And Michael was from Adelaide, and he was an NT boy as well. He said, and I thought, why would he say that to me? Why would he say that to me? And it sort of stuck into me. And unfortunately, Michael passed away very early, as he was a young man. And but I thought, gee, if that guy's prepared to do that for me, here's an Aboriginal man doing that for a white fella, why shouldn't I do something back for his people? And that's what drives me today, to be honest with you, is Michael Ahmad. His daughters, I had dinner with some of his family the other week, and they were up here from Adelaide, and his son's over in San Diego, but just a super, super family. And they're super proud of Michael, of what he did and what he did for his people. But, and now they've put him into the South Australian Hall of Fame, which is great, and recognise his services of what he did. So that was super to me. And, I had another Indigenous man who, his name was Keithy Sambo, and Keithy was really dear to me. I was working for the government, and Keith used to come out I used to do all the communities. I was working in the Indigenous department for the government and sport and recreation. And I was working with Steve Ranoff and guys like that, and there's some Darryl White, some real super, super Indigenous stars.
Yes.
There's so many more Paddy Mills out there. There's so many Danny Morseus or Nathan J.Y., people like that. We just got to give them an opportunity and find them and things like that. And so that's what I'm doing now. But, Keithy was just a super guy to me. Unfortunately, Keithy took his life, and it made a big impact onto me. And but his legacy lives on with me, sort of thing. And I'm very good friends with his family as well. His kids, they're all growing up now. So, but if I can give back something and create and find another Paddy or Danny or somebody like that, I'm happy. That's like winning championships to me. And, Danny Morseau, for instance, I took him to Melbourne. He was a 16-year-old. Danny was floating around up there playing pool or snooker in the place that didn't make a living at 16 years of age. And he lived with me for 9 months, and I gave him a job, and I put him through TAFE, and now Danny is one of the leaders of DATSIP up in the Torres Strait and doing great stuff with the basketball up there now, getting kids playing basketball. So, to me, Danny's he got to 2 Olympics and things like that. So, and you got Paddy who's doing great stuff for Indigenous people here in Australia as well. So they got some great leaders and great role models that they can follow, these kids. And if I can just be a small part of that, well, I'm very happy, because I think it's great that we, like look at Ash Barty in tennis, mate, what she's done for her people in tennis and what she gives back to it is fantastic, And we have, we need more of those people. And
Absolutely. Look, I think what do they call it, mate? What you're doing, paying it forward, right? So I think that's it's but very rewarding. They always say that giving in this way is very good for you and makes you feel good. And just talking to you, mate, when your eyes light up when we talk about that stuff, you're obviously very happy in the work you're doing. So that's very evident in what you say and what you're doing. So I think that's awesome. And you mentioned the word opportunity. It's one of my favourite words because I think opportunity is my language in terms of what we do with Study and Play USA, with helping kids go to college, which I think is just a great opportunity. There's no guarantees you're going to have success over there, but it's a great opportunity and it's what you make of it. So I just, I wanted to just get your thoughts on the college pathway because obviously when we talk basketball, the college pathway is a primary pathway for many kids, whether they're in Australia or other countries. You're in the world's best country for basketball over there. There's more depth over there than anywhere, obviously. What are your thoughts on it for an Aussie kid or any kid really from other countries in the pathway to the US?
Well, I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and not only their education, as long as they get into a good system. I have seen some very, that fall short in my view, and I've spoken to you about that off camera, and which I think is important. But I think and you look at the Australians that played in the NBA in the last couple of years. You look at the Europeans playing in the NBA, the Brazilians, the Spanish, and people like that. Excuse me. It's a great opportunity and it's a great pathway for them. And I think that, there's 3 kids over there at the moment before I met you that are over at college over there and they're doing very well. They're not at big colleges, but they're in good situations, I feel. Not that I had much to do with where they went, but we coached them and we trained them up to what they had to do. But I think, if they're basketball, there's good pathways there for them to come back to the NBL, sorry. And also there's education-wise, like I said, but it's basketball's a way of life over there. And, college sport is super. And you've been to college there, you know what it's all about. The football, the baseball, the basketball, everything is just unbelievable. I travelled over to America 16 years in a row, I think it was, in St Kilda with either playing or coaching teams over there. Fantastic opportunity. And I think, that's one of the places where I learned a lot on how to play and how to coach sort of thing. So, look, if kids want to do that and, we're hopefully we can get more kids over there and I'm sure we can. There's a lot of kids out there want to go there. We know that COVID virus has upset a lot of things at this year, but I think once it gets back to normal, we'll be right.
Yeah, no, mate, we agree. We're seeing lots of optimism out there at the moment, and it hasn't stopped our kids going over even through COVID. So I think it's blue skies ahead in that regard. But you mentioned something important. You're right. I mean, there's a lot of universities in America to choose from. Genuinely, there's probably there's not every uni is for everyone, and so you got to find the right level where you're going to play. That's important. You got to find the right coach where you're, that coach believes in you. That's very important from the outset. That needs to be established. You need some scholarship, ideally, which is coach's way of saying I do believe in you. Need the right environment where you're around the right people, and obviously the educational side of it, and making sure that you got the courses that you might be interested in. So we're very passionate about that, and that's why I'm so happy to be working with you, Brian. I think probably a good time for us to announce that actually on this podcast, that obviously you are going to be working with us in a consultant sort of capacity and helping prepare our kids for college. I think there's no better person to do that, both on court and off, for these kids. So, but yeah, you're right. I think getting the right fit, it's something very easy to say, but it's actually quite difficult, and it's worth it, because these are, at the end of the day, I think what you were saying before, I think when you go to college, and this is the same for all sports, but if you have a good experience through basketball in college, whether that is, okay, you look at your experience as being, okay, I became a pretty good player at Division II level, got to travel around America as a team, enjoyed it, got confidence, got a degree, saved mum and dad some money in the process. Then you're going to come back to your home country. In most cases, you're going to want to be involved in the game, and I think that's what a sport can determine what success is. Okay, if you've got more people involved in the game for longer, someone like Brian Kerle, then obviously the sport's done something right by that person. So that's why I'm a fan of college, because I think we can get some good kids that go to college and come back and they can be good administrators, great coaches, great players. I think that's what I love most about college opportunity.
I agree with you. Look, there is so many opportunities, and actually, I've got a young girl who's just come back from college at the moment. She's up at the WNBL up in Townsville in the bubble up there, and she's going to do some coaching for us down here at a private girls' school that we look after. And they're the things that we need to get kids back that can put something back into the game as well. They're not all going to make the NBA. And this is the thing, we've got to be realistic with these kids and say, hey, that's good to aim for the NBA, but you've got to be realistic as well. And otherwise you're going to, if you don't make it, you're going to really be deflated about it. But
correct.
Still strive for it. If it doesn't happen, hey, what's the next step? And I look, that you just got to keep doing that. I remember I missed out on the 76 Olympics in Montreal. I'd had a bit of knee injury, but I was overlooked. But the next year I got back in the Australian team. So because I didn't give up as much as I wanted to keep going. So never give up. That's the key thing. Don't give up. But the opportunities don't come by often either, Chris, in your life. But when they do, you got to grab them two hands. That's what I tell kids all the time. And my biggest issue with kids, because when we train for 2 hours in my days, we train for 2 hours. Not for 1 hour, 59 minutes. We train for 2 hours. Yep. And that's what I am installing into the kids here. Don't come here and train for an hour. You can train for an hour and get 10 minutes value, all right? Or you can train for an hour and get 2 hours value. That's what you've got to do. And if you're not prepared to do that, then you won't go on. Now, I'll give myself a plug here and my coaches and everything. I've got some fantastic young coaches here with me that I've sort of mentoring through. We've got 35 plus kids into rep basketball this year.
Fantastic.
Basketball, Div 1, Div 2 and 3. Kids that were playing Div 3 are up to Div 2 and 1, things like that. But there's most of the things like is telling them things like that. Don't come to training and mess around, fool around. I never did that. Leroy Loggins never did that. And I talked to them about Leroy Loggins. A lot of kids don't know and never saw him play. I said, when Leroy walked in that stadium and walked over that white line, he clocked on. He never took a bad shot, never walked through training. He always put out 150%. As soon as training was finished, Leroy would walk off, clock on, and now he's back in his other world.
Yep.
That's the way you get to the top. Don't think it's going to be handed to you. You've got to work for it and get it. So I try to instill that into a lot of kids, and I think that's what's helping them get more successful in their basketball. And it's in life and it's with anything.
Brian, I think that's a very pertinent point probably to finish on. I think that's, really good advice for the youngsters and for families and for parents of kids as well. So, I'm learning a lot today as well. So this has been good for me. So I can imagine for our listeners have really enjoyed this podcast, Brian. So I really appreciate your time. And been awesome to hear your story, and as I said, really looking forward to working with you to help these young kids along the college pathway. And been great hearing your story, mate.
Thank you, Mark. Take care.
Good on you.